how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, deep in the heart of Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas. I am your host, Paul Aguilar. We really appreciate you guys stopping in for another episode. If you guys are watching us on YouTube and you aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell icon. Go ahead and hit that as well as a thumbs up. That really helps out a lot. If you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can always find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio at Truth Defender Podcast. We'll have all the links, social media linked down below, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, and our locals.com account as well that we have up and running. If you guys have any questions or comments for myself, any guest or topic recommendations you guys want to shoot our way, you can shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. Our next guest is John Olsen. John was born and raised in Cache Valley. At the age of 8, he began to realize that the home he lived in was peculiar. His parents still owned the old farmhouse built in the mid-1880s. Strange experiences such as phantom knocks, loud boots, I had a lot of those as well, running the stairs and missing objects became commonplace for him as he grew up. With each run-in with what he called the man in the hat, I've had one of those as well, so we'll have definitely get that story as well. John's interest in the paranormal grew. So without further ado, Mr. John Olsen, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, talking some paranormal.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to come on with us. For anybody that wants to take a look at Mr. Olsen's work, you can head on over to strangerbridgerland.com, where you can find his work as well as his books. You have about 5 of them, I think it is, right?
Yeah, I just came out with my 5th one this fall. So, yep.
Okay, yeah. So it's kind of a collection over time of stories and such that you've had. Now, so you're coming to us from Utah, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Northern Utah. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So it's is it? I'm assuming, since I guess a lot of Native American kind of stories and such out there is.
Yeah, I've had quite a few stories of run-ins with Native American spirits. A few, one with that I interviewed a gal that what I believe she ran into was a skinwalker. It's hard to tell for sure. She was driving home through the canyon, and as she came around the corner, there was a Native American older gentleman with a wool blanket over his shoulders, and he kind of glared at her and gave her a dirty look, and she drove on, and then about a mile down the road, she came around the corner, and the same Native American was in the road again, staring at her and kind of laughing. And so somehow he got down there before she did, and she was going pretty fast. So yeah, there's quite a few stories like that I've interviewed people and had some strange things happening.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. I know for a lot of people that, I guess a lot of Native Americans don't really like to talk about skinwalkers at all, really. I've spoken to someone in my personal life that had experiences, and they never want to share like anything. I guess it's kind of that fear that if they speak about it, you bring it on, like they'd have more instances of them showing up or whatever. So
yeah,
it's kind of a weird thing. It's interesting, but you just don't find anybody that's actually willing to talk about it.
Right. And that's the same thing too with a lot of their folklore, or their because it's it's intermingled with their religion. And I've been able to speak to quite a few of them about Bigfoot and about stuff like that. And it's just amazing because in their culture and their belief, Bigfoot's both a physical creature and a spiritual creature. So it's kind of hard for people to understand. And like you say, they don't necessarily like to talk about it. And a lot of their stories and everything are oral traditions. So if they don't pass it on, they lose it. So
right. Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I understand the why nobody wants to open their mouth about anything, but at the same time, it's definitely one of those things that it's extremely interesting. And like you said, I guess it gets even more interesting when nobody's willing to say anything about it. So you always have people wanting to find out as much as I can, but it's just one of those things.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And where it's kind of like my job, I go out and try and find the stories that can sometimes it can get frustrating because you like you say they especially in the Native American culture they keep things pretty close to the chest. So
Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean,
uh,
like I said, I get it, but it's unfortunate for the rest of us that just want to get some kind of story off of it. But
mhm.
yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. So like I kind of want to start off like, can you kind of explain the instances that you had at your old house, like how things would happen? Like I mentioned, I have a few instances where w- in this old house I used to live in, I think I was about 12 years old. There was things like hearing footsteps in the middle of the night, like out in the hallways. For some weird reason, when I was younger, I used to like sleeping with my bedroom door open.
Mm.
That's never since this one instance, that's never happened ever again. But we all had that instance or like that feeling when you're asleep. Maybe you're laying on your side and you get that feeling that there's like somebody right behind you, and you don't want to turn around because there's something there.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, this one time I finally got the nerve to turn around. And when I looked behind me, there was somebody standing in my doorway. It was just like a black figure. There was no like features. You couldn't see anything. And it just kind of stood there for a while. And I remember just standing there staring at it. And I didn't say anything. Nobody said anything. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of turned and walked all the way down the hallway. Um, and I don't understand what kind of came over me at that time, but I had like the nerve to get up and like walk to the door and look down the hall. It's a long hallway. We used to have it made a right into the dining room. And in the dining room, we used to have a swinging door into the kitchen. So I went down the hallway after it, made the right, tried to open the swinging door, and it wouldn't open. Like if there was somebody behind it.
Oh wow.
And I was trying to force it open, and nothing. I could see the kitchen lights on, like underneath the crack of the door. And then after a few minutes, when I tried to push in, I was able to get in. Um, and there was nobody in the kitchen. We used to have a back door in the kitchen that had two locks. One of them was a deadbolt, and it was still locked from the inside. But whoever walked in there wasn't there anymore. So I was just like, well, it's like what the heck. So I went back to bed, and then ever since then, I've never had my door open ever like once since then. I was like 11 years old at the
Oh.
time. So that ever since that one time, that did it for me.
Well, right along with that, I remember when I was younger, growing up in the house, my parents didn't like us talking about the ghost, and we could talk a little bit to my mom, but my dad didn't want to hear anything, and he definitely didn't want us talking outside of the house, like telling anybody that our house was haunted. But um, in the house, what's interesting is growing up, there was just one bathroom, and it was in the central part of the house, and there was an entrance from like the living room and then another door that went to my parents' bedroom. So it kind of was the main bathroom, but then also, the master bedroom bathroom. And I remember I come home from school one day and my dad is tearing out the door on the side where my parents' bedroom was. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, I'm putting a wall up. And I said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "This is your mom wants this. She does. You only wants one door. Just get your stuff and help me." So I helped him put it in. But it wasn't until years later that I found out that the reason they did that is because my mother would wake up in the middle of the night and at times, and the door would be open, and this really tall figure with the wide brimmed hat would be standing in the bathroom watching them sleep. And in her thought, if we get rid of the door and put up a wall, then he won't be able to stand in the bathroom, and he won't bother us anymore. But so, yeah, definitely things like that happened, kind of like what you're explaining. Um, I've had a lot of experiences growing up, and then my parents still live in the house. So, they're still having experiences when I go over sometimes. We have experiences. I remember one time when my oldest son, uh, he was first born. My mother was she would watch him 2 or 3 days a week if my wife was working. And I come over one Saturday to talk to her, and my mother was excited. She had gotten all my old baby stuff out of um, the attic for the baby, and one of them was an old swing, baby swing, where you would have to wind it up,
Mm.
and then you put the baby in and push it, and it would go back and forth, and it would swish click. And she was showing me all these things, and then we went into the kitchen, and my mother and I were the only ones home at the time, and we were talking, and then all of a sudden, she says, "What's that noise?" And we listened, and we could hear the swing going swish click, swish click. So we walked around into the front room where this baby swing is, and it's just going back and forth.
Right.
And I said, "Did we wind it up and just leave it?" And as soon as I said that, it stopped at the back part of the swing, like somebody had grabbed it,
Okay.
and then it went down to just level, and then it gave a little shudder as if somebody's hand had let go of it, and it was very apparent that we had not wound it up. And just to make sure, I wound it up and pushed it, and if it didn't have the weight of a baby in it, it would not go back and forth like that.
Right.
So it was something that was playing with the baby swing in there. But so it's all kinds of stuff like that growing up, that and throughout that, experiences that I had.
Yeah, it's definitely odd. I have another story for you as well, but I had a question here from someone on YouTube. Ray was asking if you think experiences are a generational thing.
Um, you know, it's interesting. That definitely could be part of it. I think some people are more prone to seeing things, and being closer to that, and I do believe that that can be something passed on
Right.
throughout. I think a lot of people can have experiences, but generationally, um, I think they can be passed down. I know that going through my family history and going back, we went back as far as we could, and one of the last people that we were able to track down through all of this was on my mother's side. My mother is actually from Denmark, and her great 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 great, way back, grandfather was the basically, I can't remember the word for it in Denmark, but it was the village healer kind of guy
Okay.
that that took care of everybody that was sick. Even when the Vikings transferred to Christianity, they kept a lot of things like that. Some of their history, some of their stuff, and their healers, and he was one of those. And there were some fascinating stories about that he had experienced, even doing that. But so yeah, to answer the question, I think it can be generational for sure.
Right. And it's kind of one of those things. I know I keep going back to this in other shows as well. There was a Catholic priest by the name of Father Malachi Martin. I don't know if you're actually familiar with him, but he did a show with Art Bell a long time ago on Coast to Coast, speaking about how people or children are promised to the family's familiars, which would be more like on the demonic side of it.
Mm,
And like when they have kids, they're promised to their spirit or whatever. Like, you can have my kid's soul or life, whatever you want.
right.
And that keeps going on and on through the generations. So I definitely do believe that it could be if it gets more on like the demonic side that way.
Hmm.
But if it's just something like a haunting, like in a house or something, I don't think it would really go that far. But
Right.
it definitely would be possible, I guess, from what
Right.
he said. And he was an exorcist, so he would know more on that. So
Right. He's probably he's seen a lot of things for sure.
yeah, no,
So
yeah, it's definitely odd.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of I guess I'll get to that story real quick. So same house, around the same age. I used to walk home from school every day after football practice or whatever. Coming home at night, there was nobody at home. It was just me. Walking home, walking up to my front door. We used to have like a path all the way up to the front door. And I remember walking up to the front door with my head down, looking at the floor. I had to open like a screen door on the outside. I had my other key, had my key in my other hand, and I was about to put the key in the hole to unlock the door. Directly next to the front door on the left hand side, we had this giant window to the living room, and there was like a bush in front of it, but it kind of left like a little sliver that you could look out um, from the inside. So I'm getting ready to put my key in the hole to open the door, and I noticed that the curtain opens. And usually that would just be like my mom looking out, like she would look out the window to see was that door or something. That's kind of what I thought. But I knew at this time that she wasn't home. I knew that she was at work, and I knew she wouldn't be getting home for like another hour or so. Um, so I just remember seeing the window open, and I just saw like someone standing there. I didn't know what it was. I didn't look up. And I was just like frozen because I was like, holy shit, there should not be anybody in the house right now. And then I finally get the nerve to start looking up. And once I look up, there was a face in the window, no body or anything, just a face, white, like no lips, no features, no like eyeball, like there was no, there was just all white. Everything was white. I could make out like features, like there was a mouth and such, but there was no like lip color, like no like features or anything,
Yeah.
no ears or nothing, just like a face. And I just was just like, what the heck is going on, And I so slowly started walking backwards to the sidewalk, um, and for the longest time, I was just kind of staring at it, and it was just there, like it just looking out the window for about 20 minutes or such. And then I just like kind of turned and walked down the street a bit. Um, and then I just waited outside until my mom came home. When she came around the corner, I was like down the block just waiting. She's like, "What are you doing out here?" And I was just like, "There's somebody in the house or something in the house." And my mom was kind of like she used to like ride Harleys, and she was like one of those, like a little on the harder side. She's like, "What? Let's go!" And so she went home real quick and like opened the door, walked to the house. There's nobody in there.
Mm.
It was just like what the heck? It was one of those houses. I think we ended up buying that house. It was like a very cliche kind of story from the family had like the grandmother who ended up dying in the house or something like that in my room, which was great.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so that house was all over the place. It was weird.
Oh man, yeah, that would be scary, especially when you're a kid. You're like trying to deal with things, and you're trying to understand what's going on, and go in the house and you're like, no, I swear I saw somebody, and so yeah, it can be scary. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's definitely. I think those are the only two times that I've ever had seen anything that was like on the freaky side. I
Mhm.
remember seeing my grandfather when he passed away. I remember seeing him in the living room in his recliner, like he always was. And
Mhm.
then I walked into the living room, and he wasn't there anymore. But the recliner was opened up, like there was somebody there.
Oh yeah.
So I was just like, "Whoa, what the heck?" And then I went to go wake up my grandmother, and she was like, "Oh yeah," like she's like an older Mexican woman. She's just like, "Oh yeah, it's him. He's here, whatever." And I was just like,
Yeah.
"What do you mean? That's it? That's it? That's how you're gonna explain it away?"
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh.
it was definitely weird, and it's definitely I've never seen anything like creepy like older in my life, like like later in my life. But
Mhm.
then I don't know what it was about that time period. I was seeing everything around that time, so
Yeah.
it was definitely weird.
Well, and it's interesting too because there'll be I've had instances when I've had people call me or contact me, and they're having um I'll give you an example. I had a friend that I'd known for a while, and but we'd lost contact, and he contacted me because he knew that I did this, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "I got stuff that's moving, I got noises, and it's a new house." He's like, "This is really weird," and I said, do you have a daughter that just turned just became a teenager? And he said, yeah, I do. How did you know that? And I said, it's funny because I've heard a lot of times when there won't be necessarily a ghost present, but then when kids turn to teenagers, especially girls for some reason in some cases, they suddenly start having poltergeists things that go on in the house, and it's really fascinating uh, that that happens. And I don't know what it is with teenagers and that time, but it's kind of weird for sure.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely. I guess once they always say that like younger kids are able to see ghosts for whatever reason, like especially when they're babies and stuff like that. And I guess as they get older, that part of I guess their brain or whatever they can see across the veil starts to close, and then they just don't have we just don't have access to it anymore. But
Right.
it's kind of it would be kind of on the same level as like cats and dogs as well. They they're able to sense things.
Hmm.
Even dogs are able to sense like earthquakes before they happen. So it's just kind of like that weird like level in between or something. I don't know.
Right. There's stuff that we just can't quite understand, that, how, even with people getting premonitions or, different things like that, there seems to be a level out there that we're not quite sure how it all works together, but it's definitely fascinating for sure.
Right. Yeah. It's fascinating and definitely terrifying, especially when you have things like the Hat Man as well. I know you had stories about those. Can you kind of go into those right now?
So yeah, the one the one that we called the Hat Man in the house that when we were growing up, um, I don't think it's tied to the shadow hat men that people are seeing all over. I'll give you an example of the hat men that we saw growing up.
Right.
Um, when I was in about eighth grade, I remember I came home from school. My mom wasn't home, and I made some food in the kitchen and went into with I made a sandwich, went into the front room. I was going to watch some TV, and I sat down. And before I could get up, I saw some movement out of the corner of my eye towards the entryway, and I looked, and here's this guy standing there. He had a white shirt and overalls and a wide brimmed, almost like uh, just a wide brimmed hat.
Right.
But I could see through him, and I couldn't see any facial features. And he walked in and sat down across from me in the rocking chair and started rocking back and forth in the rocking chair. And I closed my eyes and I counted to 10, and I opened him and he was gone, but the rocking chair was still moving. So I kind of did what you did. I jumped up and I ran outside to the porch outside until my mom came home, until somebody else came home. Um, but so he was kind of one of the spirits in the house. I think I've kind of narrowed it down. Well, I did kind of narrow it down to either a great great grandpa that I had that owned the house, or a great great uncle that I had that owned the house. Because later on, when my grandmother passed away and we were cleaning out her house, she was only lived a block away from us. I was going through an old photo album she had, and I turned the page, and there was the guy, tall, skinny, white shirt, overalls, standing in front of my house. And from what we can tell, it was either a great great grandpa or a great great uncle of mine that used to own the house. So
Sure. And so do you kind of think, I mean, you always hear stories about people that maybe see like their grandparents or someone that they know like right in front of them, but on the other side of town, they're like in a car accident and like they die or stuff like that.
mhm,
Um, I don't know. So I'm assuming. I mean, we all kind of have those instances where we see something like out of the corner of our eye, and that could be, I guess, labeled as a hat man or shadow man, stuff like that. But
right.
I'm kind of thinking if, I mean, they would obviously have to be kind of related in the same way. Is it kind of like the same? I don't know. Obviously, if it's some kind of like demon or that person died like a long time ago, that would be something else. But you would kind of think that it would kind of be kind of the same thing. Say like someone having that instance, like I said, where their grandparent dies on the other side of town, and somehow they see them like in their room or they see them outside. It's kind of that's always interesting to me as well, like how that whole thing works there.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I guess maybe not related, but kind of related in some way.
Yeah, it's interesting. In through all the studies I've done and interviewing people and the experiences I've had, I know that um, there are spirits, of people who were alive that have passed on, And when you're dealing with those, I explain it. I tell people that it's just like meeting people on the street. If you meet 10 people on the street, 9 out of 10 are pretty good people. It's that 10th one that can be a real jerk that you got to
Yeah.
look out for. It's the same with the people who passed on
Yeah.
and maybe in your house. And then there's definitely, darker things, um, demons and entities like that. And then I've interviewed a lot of people too, who've had experiences with shadow creatures and these shadow men in the wilderness.
Hmm.
And they seem, most cases, are bigger. Like when people see them in the city and in their house, they're usually about the size of a person. But I've interviewed people who've had experiences with shadow people. Like, for example, I interviewed a kid, or he was a kid at the time. Him and his buddies had gone into the Wind Rivers in Wyoming camping, and they had some shadow figures sit on the hill watching them camping. And when they rode up the next day to see where they'd been standing, they were close to 20 feet tall standing next to the trees. So they were huge. And for some reason, like in the wilderness, they seem to be like a lot bigger. And I almost feel like those are like uh almost like a nature or really older kind of entity for some reason, something that's been there a lot longer than us or something of that nature. So, but it's really fascinating, the different kinds of things. Again, like you said, people who see family members who've passed on, their grandparents saying goodbye. I know I haven't written about the story, but I did talk to somebody who, um, the grandmother had passed away that night and nobody knew it, but um all three of the children who had children of their own at the time had an experience where their youngest child had woken up in the middle of the night and was talking to somebody and saying goodbye grandma, and then went to bed, but there was nobody there. But then they found out that their mother, the grandma, had passed away that night, and they figured she had just come to say goodbye to the youngest children for some reason, maybe along the lines of being them still being able to see them, like we talked about the veil being thinner for them. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that go on, different levels, I guess, of the paranormal.
Sure. Yeah, I guess it would just kind of depend on the person that was seeing them, how like in touch they are with, I guess, the other side. There's, like a lot of people, they never see anything, which is also one of those things. But it's kind of like, um, I guess for people that you always hear about how maybe like a spirit is somebody that's stuck on earth because they have something left to do, or like they feel like they had something left in their life and they just can't move on. That obviously happens for a lot of people, but it's kind of a weird thing, like I mentioned during that time in my life when I was about 11, 12 years old, 13, like that. That was kind of a weird time because I had my grandfather, which I was really close with. He died around that time. And then a year later, my mom died. So I was kind of stuck in between like this weird time where all these things were happening and there's like a lot of feelings going on. And it was just, I guess it kind of, I guess traumatic events would probably open that up as well for people, or just kind of depend on what's going on with them. But yeah, it's just kind of a weird thing. Um, I mean, who knows? We'll probably never figure it out exactly what it is until we end up crossing over, and hopefully I don't get stuck here as well. But
Right,
it's kind of
right.
a, yeah, because I mean, you always hear people like their grandparents died or like their parents died, and like they ask for a sign and then maybe they get a sign from something higher or it was them or something. But
Hmm.
or like they have dreams and stuff like that. I've never once like had a dream or seen anything about, besides seeing my grandfather that one time. But
Yeah.
besides that, there was like no dreams. There was no seeing anything of anything like related to my mom or anything like that. That was kind of more on my wife when she was about to give birth to our son. She had a dream about my mom, and like they were talking about whatever, and then like my son came and all that stuff. So it was kind of a, I don't know, like a weird thing, I guess. I don't know. It was like, I've never had anything like that. So I don't know, but she had it. So that was good. Because, it was kind of a weird thing. She was to explain things to me about her that she had obviously never met my mom because she died when I was like 12 years old.
Right.
Um, but she would like explain to me about she had like really big, long curly hair. It was like red and stuff. And she's like, "Oh yeah, I saw." And I was just like, "Wait, that was like my mom." You know, it's weird.
Right.
uh,
Yeah, and I think that, you know, i- family members on the other side, I think they can keep touch, and especially big, big events like that. Your firstborn child, stuff like that. Um, your Of course your mother would want, to be connected somehow to that kind of a deal. So, it makes sense. I know that, personally for me, and I wrote this in I believe it was my first book. I wrote this story. Um, my grandmother passed away, that I was close to, in Denmark. Like I said, my mother is from Denmark, and at the time, nobody could afford to go but my mom and dad that went to the funeral and then came back, and so there wasn't this feeling of no closure for the longest time. And then one night or one morning, um, Saturday, my wife at the time, she was a hairdresser, and she would get up early on Saturdays to go do wedding updos. And that's how, there was a lot of those going on. And at the time, we just had my one son, and so he was asleep on the other side of the house. My wife had got up and left, and I was just laying in bed, and I was between dreaming and not dreaming. I was kind of semi awake, and there was a knock at my door, and I said, "Come in." And it was my grandma, and she came in and she sat on the bed, and we had a long conversation about how the my kid was doing, how my mom was doing, everybody. And then I looked at her, and I remember saying, "Grandma, you passed away." And she smiled and she says, "That doesn't mean that I can't come visit you from time to time." And she got up and she left. And as soon as she shut the door, I came to full consciousness. I wouldn't say that I was dreaming, but um and I could still smell her perfume in the air. I could still see it. And some people who don't believe would say, well, that was your subconscious,
yeah,
trying to get closure.
right.
And but having lived it and gone through it, I know for a fact my grandma came in and said goodbye. She came to see me and ask how everybody was doing. And so, like you say, unless you've had an experience like that, or an experience like yours with the ghost and stuff like that, um, it's hard to understand. But it's amazing to me, the people out there that I interview, that's like, I didn't believe in this or that, and then I had the weirdest experience of my life, and now I can't deny, what's going on, and it gets them very interested in the paranormal.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things for a lot of people, whether they believe or don't believe, like in Bigfoot, or they don't believe in UFOs, or for whatever reason, and then they finally see something, and it's just like, whoa, what the heck? But yeah, I mean, like speaking to that, Ray again said that maybe it's not really the other side. Maybe it's just existing all around us. And when intentions and vibrations coincide, we finally get a glimpse of, like what's around us and things like that. And it kind of, I mean, that makes sense. I do believe that there's like this whole other world around us that we just can't see, that we just can't tap into at this time. I'm willing to bet that there's your loved ones are all around you all the time. The only thing that's missing is their physical form, but
Right.
they're still kind of living amongst us. Whether it be here or out there, wherever they're at. But they're finally able to come back and see or say hi here and there. But
Hmm.
that's definitely a good observation there. Yeah, it's definitely one that I actually have thought about a lot in the past. I definitely think that they're all around us. They just choose not to, or for whatever reason, whenever we need to see them for, like if there's some kind of event in our lives or something where it's necessary that we actually speak with them, for whatever reason, then they'll be presented to us. So
Yeah,
it's it's,
definitely,
it's always
for
good.
sure.
Yeah.
I do a lot of, because of, you know interviewing people and stuff, and I meet people from all different walks of life and all backgrounds. So I study a lot about religion and about this, all the different religions, just so I can see, where the belief system comes from and everything. And there's quite a few religions out there specifically that believe um that the spirit realm is still here. It's all around us, like you say, but there's just that veil in front of us, and we can't see them and they can't see us except for sometimes when it's thin. And so it's just an interesting concept. I love the whole idea. So
Right. Yeah, and that would kind of lead me into another kind of way as well. I remember I heard you speaking with George and Ari about I guess kind of missing time and like missing people as well. I think we've all, I mean, myself especially, had those kind of instances where you're driving down the street and you kind of space out all of a sudden, and then when you kind of realize what's going on again in your head, you're somewhere like downtown or something, and you don't remember how you got there.
yeah.
I don't remember like driving down this road and like making all these turns and whatever, and all of a sudden I'm just there. Like, have you had any kind of crazy stories about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's so that's really fascinating to me. It's one of my favorite kind of stories that um, when I get to interview people, I call them glitches in the matrix kind of a thing because they don't necessarily fall under ghosts or anything like that. I know for my last book, I interviewed a guy who lived in Ohio. And his instance was he had gone to, he was at work and his boss asked him to go get some stomach medicine for him at the store and normal everyday kind of thing. And so he goes to the store. When he goes, walks in, it's only a couple blocks away, but he drives over. When he walks into this little grocery store, he suddenly gets dizzy, like really dizzy, to where he has to sit down for a minute to clear his head. And when his head gets cleared, he realizes that they've changed the store from the last time he was in there. The aisles are different, the registers are on the different side, and he just figures, well, they rearranged the store. He goes down, finally finds the medicine aisle. He's looking for the medicine, and he notices in his peripheral vision somebody walk up by him, and he looks over, and it's his brother. And he's like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And the guy looks at him and just gives him a dirty look, and he's like, "Fine." And he's like, "Oh, I thought you were on vacation." And he's like, "No." And he's like, "You and Steph, your wife, were on vacation. When did you get back?" And he's like, I don't know anybody named Steph, and I don't know who you are." And he's like, and he and as his brother walks off, he kind of taps him like you would your brother. You hit him and like, "Hey, what's going on?" And this guy just railed around on him and poked him in the chest and said he didn't know who he was and that he's going to knock him flat if he didn't leave him alone. And so he watches the guy leave and he gets the medicine and he pays for it. And he said the other strange thing was the lady that was behind the counter was just like super ornery and mean. And as he left, she even growled at him. He's like, it was a really strange. He leaves the store, and as he leaves the store, he gets dizzy again. He sits in his car, gets the air blowing on his face so he can, pull himself out of it.
Right.
And he drives back to work. His boss wants to know where he's been. He's like, "Well, what do you mean? You sent me to the store." And he goes, "Yeah, but that was 2 hours ago." And he's like, 2 hours? He's like, "I've only been gone 20 minutes." And his boss like, "No, you've been gone 2 hours." He's sick to his stomach. He tells his boss he's sick. He goes home, goes to bed, doesn't feel good. Next morning, he calls his brother. His brother's still on vacation, um, and with his family. It wasn't his brother. And so he just doesn't know. He feels like when he walked into that store, he walked through into another dimension, something weird that went on. And um, as a standalone story, it's really kind of cool. But you can kind of dismiss it. Oh, maybe the guy's lying, whatever. But there's been so many times I've interviewed people where they've had experiences where they're suddenly not where they were, like you were talking about. There was a gal that I interviewed, and she was getting ready for work one day, and she worked at this store across town, and she talked to her mother, and her mother was sitting in the chair watching TV, and said, talk to her about the day. She walks into the bathroom. The next thing she knows, she's in her car 10 minutes from the house driving to work. And she pulls
Yeah.
over to the side of the road and she's like in shock. She's like, "How did I get here? I don't remember getting here," like you were talking about. She calls her mother on her cell phone and her mother says, "Why are you calling me from the bathroom?" She's like, "Just watched you walk into the bathroom." And she says, "No, mom, I am 10 miles from the house halfway to work. And she's like, no, you're not. I watched you just walk into the bathroom. So, things like that happen. There's so many people that I've interviewed that's had things like that are just super strange, like beyond weird. And it just makes you wonder what's going on. So, uh,
Yeah, it's I don't know. I've always been of like I guess I've always had the thought that um well I've always had the thought that missing people don't go missing people by accident. Like they're just it could be, but I've always felt that there was something more to it. Um I've also always had thoughts that you could just be walking down the street one day and then some kind of glitch, you say like wormhole opens up or something right in front of you, you can't even tell, and then you just walk into it without even knowing, and then you're just gone forever. Like I don't remember. It's going to be kind of anecdotal for a lot of people because I heard this story one time about a guy that was kind of walking down the street or something, and he noticed that there was some kind of a like I guess like a wormhole or something right in front of him that opened up, and he looked through it, and there was like a whole other like world and galaxy or something in it, and it was a story about um, he had it had been like way back in the day, like hundreds of years in the past, and he was looking through this portal or whatever it was into the future, and there was like buildings and all kinds of flying whatever walking driving around cars and such. So like he caught like a glimpse into somewhere else, and I wonder if those things just kind of open up randomly all around us.
right. And when I got, hearing some of these stories and doing some research, and I don't have it in front of me, but there's an amazing amount of people in the United States, like a really crazy amount of people that just fall off the face of the earth. There, and I always go to this one story that I read about. There was an older gentleman. He had just retired. He lived in California. Him and his wife had their dream house. They're all excited because they retired. They're in the kitchen having lunch. And he says, I'm going to go out. I'm going to go mow the back lawn. And she goes, okay. He walks out the back door and she goes, oh, I forgot to tell him something. And she goes to and opens the door and he's not there. He's not in the backyard. And she looks all over for him and he's nowhere in the yard. He disappeared. And he never came back from going to mow the lawn. And it wasn't one of those things where, you know, he went for a drive and they never found him in the car. He literally walked out to the backyard to go mow the lawn and nobody ever saw him again. And she had told the police and they kind of were like, well, and they couldn't figure it out. And it's one of those things that there's so many people that you look into. There's a lot of people that go missing, and a lot of them are kids and people who are in circumstances that make it dangerous and stuff like that. But there is just this number of people that seem to just, like I say, walk through a door and they never come back. And I go back to the story of the guy that went to the grocery store that I interviewed. What if he had never come back out of whatever he walked into? They would just think he was a missing person. And now he would just be a weird person in another dimension or however that works. It's just, and the more I learn about it and the more I read about it and the more I interview people, the more I know that there is some weird things going on in the world that we can't explain for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's definitely scary to think. I mean, you could just be walking to the restroom or something at night, and then you just like fall through some kind of hole, and then you're just gone, and nobody ever sees you. It's that kind of brought up another thought in my mind, like what if some of the most, I guess, like like the biggest figures throughout history or something that would seem to be like ahead of their time or something actually were ahead of their time,
Right.
and they just kind of fell somewhere and they just existed and they were from the future, and then
Uh-huh.
now all of a sudden they're back there and they're creating all kinds of crazy tech. Like freaking Nikola Tesla is like one of the ones that you would think about.
Yeah.
Maybe he wasn't from that time. Maybe he was from the future and he just came back, and whatever. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, it's just it would just be kind of one of those weird things.
It's interesting. I read a story not too long ago. I wish I had it in front of me, but the had they were keeping an eye, because the government keeps an eye on people who are trading stocks,
Mhm.
and people who do too well. They're like, is there insider trading, whatever. Well, there was this guy that suddenly just appeared on the scene, and in 3 or 4 weeks made $30 million on the stock market. And so they immediately went and talked to him, and there was something he was telling them, that he had information about the future, and this is how I got the information. I'm not from here, I'm from the future. And then he just kind of disappeared. He just kind of disappeared and went away.
Yep.
And there's no rest of the story. It's kind of, they interviewed him, he said that he was from the future, and that's how he made the money, and then he just kind of disappeared. And it's stuff like that that's just really weird. Just kind of, it fascinates me. I love hearing those stories, and I love
Yeah.
searching them out, because you just don't know, like, what's going on. And are there really time travelers, and how does that, how would that work? And so it's fascinating for sure.
His name wasn't Biff, was it?
No, I don't think it was Biff, but that's
Yeah,
uh
it's odd.
that's
It's weird. It's definitely you would hope for things like that to actually exist. I'm pretty sure they do somewhere out there, but
mhm,
it's definitely. I just remember thinking about that one time, and I was just like, what if these guys aren't from that time? Like, what if they're not even from this planet or whatever? They're just like ahead of their time, really, and they come and change the world. So that's
right.
great for us, but it's just kind of a weird thing. But yeah, it's definitely odd. I mean, considering all the missing people that we have every year, I think last year was like 600,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it's a crazy
Um,
number.
but you never hear anything about it. Ever. Like nobody makes a big deal about anything. You would think for some of the like minuscule kind of weird things that go on in the news every day that these numbers aren't as bigger. Like, why does nobody care that these people are missing? Like,
Right.
they're gone. Like, we don't know what happened to them. And that's just in the U.S. I'm sure all over the world it's the same thing. But
Right. and
I mean,
and it's like, and when, with all the people that go missing in the national parks, and then to find out that the government doesn't even track that.
yeah.
They don't even track who, the people, they put them on a poster for a little while and then throw it in the garbage, and then they just like, oh, I guess he was eaten by a bear, we won't worry about it. So
So I mean, it's funny. I had heard stories about how back in the day they used to put like missing children on the back of milk cartons or whatever. I think I remember hearing that like only one person was ever found off of that. Like out of the thousands that they put on there, like every week or whatever, like nobody was
yeah,
ever found. And nobody cares. I mean,
I know.
obviously their family cares, whoever knows them,
Right.
but it's just like whatever, and like it's it's odd that I mean, it's definitely funny that you talk about like the forests and all that stuff because obviously David Paulides has some great work on that. I've read almost all of his books. I think I need like one of them left, but any kind of information that he has, I'm all over it all the time. But I'm definitely interested to see like what happens. Obviously, a lot of people just go into the woods, don't want to be found, and they never are, or like a lot of people just die for whatever reason out there.
Hmm.
Um, but there's definitely those people that go missing, and the ones that are lucky enough to come back, they always have some crazy stories about where they were and like what they saw.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it's odd.
it's it's amazing how many of in his books, I've read all his books too, with people who, they get ahead or behind, and they go around a corner, and the same kind of thing, they're just all of a sudden gone. They went around a corner and out of sight, now they're gone. you know it's just, yeah, it's just creepy for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. I mean, so like I remember hearing you speak about that one of your like favorite topics is Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Is I guess do you kind of lean more towards something from another planet, universe, or it's just something that's been here since the beginning that we just have never found?
I don't know if I've really come up with this, with a, a solution
Yeah.
on what it is, because in some way, it would be so hard to hide in some places that they see them. I'm obviously in the Northwest, where planes go missing and they never find them again. There's definitely places to hide, but like for example, in northern Utah, there's a lot of sightings of Bigfoot and Sasquatch, and it's a big area, but it's you just don't know, and uh, you just wonder if there isn't something going on that they can transport. And again, like we talked about at the very beginning with the Native Americans, when you ask them, is Bigfoot a creature or is it a spirit, or and they'll be like yes, and it's kind of everything.
Yeah.
um and so it's just kind of it's fascinating. So I don't know personally. I do know there's something out there. Even though I haven't seen anything yet, I would love to. That would be one of the things that is definitely on my bucket list. And but I've interviewed too many people and talked to too many people who've seen it, seen Sasquatch to know that there's definitely something to it. There's definitely something out there.
Right. Yeah. And then, tomorrow I'll be interviewing Mr. Raymond Zemansky, who was actually, uh, I think he was an engineer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for like
Oh,
many, many years. So definitely be one of my questions on there. Hey, man, you guys bring Bigfoot from another world or something?
right.
It's definitely. I mean, I've heard stories of people that would see a Bigfoot like in the woods or something, and then I don't remember exactly where the story came from, but that they saw like UFOs in the sky while they saw this Bigfoot, and then they actually seen that it was taken up into a craft or something like that, which is definitely. I mean, anything's possible, but I'm kind of on the same fence. I don't see how you'd be able to hide. I mean, you could, but I don't see how you'd be able to hide for all this time.
Right.
And just somebody just not stumbling upon something, whether it be bones or like a carcass or whatever. And I've heard stories that they're really good about hiding themselves, like even after they die, like they're really good about taking care of that. But I
Yeah.
mean, just like one throughout history. I mean, it's just one weird. I definitely think they come from somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. It's just so hard to tell. You just don't know. There's something there, and I think it's just the same with all the paranormal. That's what keeps us going and keeps research and keeps
Yeah.
gathering stories, is because it's just so fascinating. You know.
Yeah. So I'm assuming kind of like out there in Utah, is it more? I mean, obviously you have like your cities and such, but is it a lot of open area, like a lot of mountainous area? Is it
Yeah.
room for that kind of stuff to exist out there?
There is there's a lot of wilderness area, especially in the area where I'm at, and then in central Utah, there's a mountain range called the Uintas, which is what
Right.
you hear about Skinwalker Ranch that butts up against the Uinta Basin and Uinta Mountains. So there's a lot of area for different things that go on, and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, and especially even about my own state with everything that's going on.
Right.
UFOs, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, ghosts, you name it.
Is there kind of like a local kind of, I guess, I'm like every state seems to have like their own local kind of cryptid or something. Is there something like that out there with you guys?
Um, Close to where I am, there's a great big lake. It actually is between Utah and Idaho. It's called Bear Lake, and it has had stories of the Bear Lake monster for, yeah, I mean, as far back as you can remember. And even though they haven't seen it for years and years and years, it's very much like a Loch Ness kind of thing that
Right.
lives in the lake. Um, and so there's the Bear Lake monster that people talk about, and they still, do a lot with that, the towns around there, because it's a big summer home area where people come in for the summer.
Sure.
And definitely Bigfoot in the area is a big one, and just a lot of history with you know uh, the the Native Americans were here, and then the Spaniards came up through Utah looking for gold, and they had
Right.
um, gold mines, and so there's a lot of stories about hidden gold mines in Utah, which I love hearing those stories as well. And but there's a lot of stuff like that, UFOs and everything.
Yeah, that's definitely it was an odd kind of story. I remember interviewed a gentleman by the name of Robert Beto, who was kind of um, explaining to me how the whole Spanish and like, well, the Aztec kind of found their way up into Utah as well, and like kind of how they kind of existed there for some time. So that was like a whole kind of remarkable story. But then the Spanish came and all that kind of good stuff, and Spanish were known to cause ruckus throughout history. So that was kind of a crazy story. But that story was kind of involved with like giants that were around those times, and they were coming up from Mexico with the Aztecs, and just all kinds of crazy stories like that. So
Right. There's
that's
a lot of stories like that where they, people have supposedly found, burial sites with these giants, yeah, through Utah and southern Utah and Arizona. There's those. I love those stories too. Those are really good stories as well.
yeah, they always seem to disappear out of in the thin air. Whenever they find some kind of bones or whatever, they're just gone,
Hmm.
which is really unfortunate. But it's kind of I guess what you would have to do if you kind of want to not let people know that there's more out there. So
I have this theory, and it's just a theory
mm,
because I don't have any proof, but I believe that somewhere in the Smithsonian there's an entire locked down section that has all of those things that don't belong, like that don't fall into what the norm should be, and they keep them down there. I
yeah,
would love to be, that would be true and they would let me go through there, but that's my theory is they have special, a huge area underneath the Smithsonian where they keep things that shouldn't exist.
yeah. I mean, that's always been the story. That the Smithsonian would show up whenever there was giant bones found, and then they would take them, and then wherever they're at, I guess maybe under the building or like in tunnels or whatever. It's the same thing you hear about stories about like the Vatican and stuff, how they have underground tunnels with all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't doubt for a second that they have crazy, I guess, bones or things that came from ancient times that they don't want anybody to see. So
Yeah.
it's unfortunate, but they're down there. I do think they exist, and they're
Yeah.
always finding stuff, every year. So
Yeah.
um, it's kind of weird if you go to like, I guess, Peru and those areas. They don't like they don't play those kind of things. Whenever they find something, they put them on display. It's like they have those elongated skulls that they have on
Oh yeah.
display and such. So I think they have a crystal skull down there as well. I spoke with I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he has a crystal skull in his possession as well, that he's actually taken down there several times, and they start to light up and all kinds of crazy things happen. So
Yeah.
it's just like the Indiana Jones movie when he's walking in that big room and there's just a bunch of
Yeah.
crates filled with ancient like antiquities and all kinds of crazy things. So,
Right. Isn't that, yeah, that's fascinating. And there's a lot of different stories of people, they find something like like you say, the giant bones of a giant, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the Smithsonian came and took it." And then the Smithsonian's like, "We
we don't
never,
have it.
what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about." And so yeah, you don't know. But a lot of things end up in private collections too that, we never get to see. So,
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. There's a lot of people that want to own a bunch of crazy things. I remember being in Japan a long time ago when I was in the military, and I had heard stories about um, like old samurai swords that they were trying to find, and they belonged to like old freaking samurais and such, but they belonged to like certain collections, and they would pay like
yeah.
billions of dollars for them. And it's just like I have no doubt that somebody somewhere high up that has a lot of money has a whole room full of stuff, and
Right.
they'll just never find it.
No, yeah, exactly. And especially like in like World War II and stuff like that, there was a lot of things that like the Nazis pilfered, works of art and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
they've only recovered some of it. So you just never know what people are going to find and stumble across. That's another thing, I don't know if it necessarily falls under paranormal, but the whole missing treasure and stuff like
yeah,
that is fascinating and it's fun to talk about too. So
yeah. No, yeah, it's definitely great. Yeah, so I guess kind of like one more question as we wind down here. So I heard you. So what's kind of your idea about vampires? I know we spoke to Dark Waters a while back, and he's in Louisiana, um, and specifically New Orleans. But he mentioned that they had vampires in New Orleans, not obviously what you would see like in movies and such that they go around sucking your blood. Although there are some that think they are and they do that kind of stuff, but
Right.
it was more of kind of like a how would you call it, like a spiritual kind of vampire. Like they would kind of, you'd have like those people that you would just walk into a room and all of a sudden you just kind of like feel dread, like they just kind of feed off of your psyche and like your
Hmm.
emotions. Do you maybe kind of believe that more to be the case, or have you heard anything about actual vampires existing?
So, your classic vampires, I haven't, come across any stories of people having their blood sucked or anything like that.
Right.
I did interview a guy that him and his wife were visiting Seattle, and they were in the hotel, and it's the middle of the night, and he wants to get something from the store. It's across the street. It's a nice part of town, so he's not worried about it. And he goes out, and as he's walking to the convenience store, this guy steps out of the shadows.
Hmm.
And he said the minute the guy looked at him, he just had like this warm feeling come over him where he was just frozen.
Right.
And the guy looked at him and he says, he said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And the guy said he felt like he was in a trance. And this really young, pale guy, nice looking, everything, asked him, "Do you have any money?" And he pulled out his wallet and pulled out all of his money and handed it to him.
Right.
And this young guy, took half of it and gave half back to him, says, "I don't need it, all of it," and gave it back to him. And he said, "Okay," and put it in his wallet. And the guy said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm with my wife." And he says, "You're okay to go back to your wife now. You're fine." And the kid disappeared. And he said, "I've never had that." And the guy just kind of walked off and was gone. But he said he had such this power over him. He would have done anything for this guy, whatever he asked him. And he wasn't afraid he had a knife on him or anything like that. He was being mugged. But this guy had just an instant power over this guy where he would have literally done anything he asked him to do. And he has
Right.
no idea why he was doing that or why he handed him half his money and stuff like that. So I think that would be fall under that kind of category where it's somehow this guy has a power to be able to, you know, put his will over somebody, almost
Right.
like an X-Men kind of a power.
Yeah.
So, and I've heard stories like that from other, writers and stuff, and people who have run into people like that um, have weird powers like that. And I would almost say they fall under the category of a vampire kind of person like that, um, to be able to manipulate people or take whatever they want. And I've heard stories of them, people running into them, and then 50 years later when they're older they run into them again and they haven't aged in
Hmm.
50 years. So it's fascinating. I think it's another one that I just love, what's going on and what's the deal with them. And I know in Louisiana there's a lot of stories like that, in the French Quarter and stuff, like with people running into vampires like that.
Yeah. Wonder if that kind of falls under the same thing of like the Black Eyed Children or stuff like that. It would kind
Right.
of be along those lines. Except, I mean, I guess it would kind of fall in line as you hear stories about, them asking for you to let them in the house or whatever, and they can't cross that threshold unless you invite them in.
Right.
So that's definitely in line with the whole vampire story as well. They can't come in unless you let them in.
Yeah.
So that would
And
definitely
it's
be,
amazing how many things in our culture and that we take that are rooted in like traditions and stuff like that, like
yeah.
evil not being able to come in your house unless you invite them and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. That's a whole show in itself. Talking about black eyed kids and stuff like that. It's definitely that, and like Men in Black and like Black Eyed Kids and such. Those are definitely on my list as well. We'll definitely get into that as well more tomorrow, especially with the Men in Black. I do believe our guest tomorrow has a great story about that as well.
Very cool.
So we'll definitely do that. Well, Mr. Olsen, I really appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and let you go here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I appreciate you taking the time to come on with us. Now, can you find your books on your website, or is that only on Amazon?
You can get them. You can go to my website, and you can, if you want to connect with me or find out where I'm speaking next, as I'm there. You can find all of my books on Amazon, either on Kindle or softback, and a few of them are even now on Audible. Just look up the Stranger Bridgerland book series, um, and you can find them all there on Amazon.
Right. Yeah, we'll definitely have the website linked down below, strangerbridgerland.com. For everybody interested in picking up a book, I definitely highly recommend it. And then, like I said, you can find out where he's speaking next. I saw you did Para X this past year. You'll be in it as well for next year.
Yeah, next year doing that one again, and hopefully now that the virus is calming down, people are opening up. There'll be more opportunities to go speak around the country again. So that would be great if I could do that. So
yeah, it's definitely fun. We definitely need to get everybody out again, and I know especially things like that, conferences and such, everybody really enjoys and they really want to get back to it. So
yeah,
it definitely feeds our need for the strange and weirdness out there. So we'll definitely be looking out for that. Yeah, Mr. Olsen, I really appreciate your time, sir. I'll be definitely linking down the show notes as well for your website and all the books as well for everybody that wants to go ahead and pick that up. And like I mentioned before, everybody that's listening to us on YouTube, I really appreciate your time. For everybody that sent in their questions as well, we have in the comment section. Appreciate you guys. Like I mentioned, if you guys are checking us out on YouTube, please consider subscribing if you aren't already a subscriber, hitting that thumbs up as well as turning on that bell icon so you guys don't miss an episode in the future. We'll be back tomorrow with Mr. Raymond Zemansky. He was an engineer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. So we'll be hopefully getting into some stories about Project Blue Book, what happened to Roswell as well, definitely that Men in Black story that he has going for you guys. If you guys are on the go, you want to check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio at Truth Defender Podcast. All of our social media will be linked down below. And if you guys want to shoot us an email about our guest tonight, if you guys have any questions, show or guest or topic recommendations, you can shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776@gmail.com. I hope everybody had a great week and looking forward to the weekend. Everybody stay blessed out there, stay safe, and most of all, stay frosty.
perfect.